boy Luke, back again with another NFL Showdown video, this time for Thursday Night Football between the Cleveland Browns and the Denver Broncos. And this is a little bit of a shit show to this point. We have a ton of injuries on each side of the equation. Overall, not very good pricing from Draftkings either. Baker Mayfield expected to not play, but we have some massive Draftkings contests. Obviously, some edges to be had if we're able to project these injury situations correctly. So this video, even more important than usual. What we're going to do is we'll first cover an injury report to get an idea of what I'm talking about by this decimation. We'll talk about a game flow or two that I expect, and of course, our favorite stud options for each team on DFS, our favorite value plays, and of course, our favorite selections for the captain slot. So essentially all the information that you need for the Thursday Night Football slate. So without any more delay, let's hop right into the picks here for this week. So beginning with an injury report on the Broncos side of things, we have Teddy Bridgewater at the helm, going to be questionable, has been limited in walkthrough so far. Though he was injured last week, was obviously able to play through it. I do expect him to play, but something we're going to have to keep an eye on just in case anything flares up. In terms of Noah Fant, he was also limited throughout the walkthroughs, expected to play though. Again, a little bit more precautionary, so after an injury report comes out here on Wednesday evening, obviously going to know a little bit more about that. And I'll just mention now, we're also going to have a live stream there on Thursday evening. That'll be at 6 p.m. Eastern time. That is going to be when we do all of our Thursday night streams. On there, we'll cover any of the updates from the Wednesday injury report, obviously any updates on Thursday as well, and get you guys completely updated before the slate. So keep that in mind. A couple of these guys, we're not going to know for sure that they're playing until at the very least tomorrow. We have Todd Bowles on the offensive line, questionable, also expected to play. One of those people being held out for precautionary reasons. Jerry Jeudy has a quote-unquote less than 50% chance to play per Vic Fangio. Somebody who's on IR has not been activated off of that yet. Could today or could tomorrow. Again, we'll have to keep an eye on that. But as of right now, at least per Fangio, has less than 50% chance of playing. So as of right now, projected to be out in terms of my player pool. Albert O is going to remain on the IR. At tight end, Alexander Johnson going to be on IR. Andre Mintz also on IR for this team. In terms of defensive players that we have questionable, we have Caden Stearns at safety and Aaron Patrick at linebacker, both questionable to suit up. So quite a few injuries on that team. Again, a lot of people that are injured but expected to play, so maybe not so much of a fantasy impact. On the Brown side of things, though, we have an absolute dumpster fire. First of all, Baker Mayfield, doubtful, was just updated to that today. Again, has the separated shoulder right there. Got a little bit worse against the Cardinals game. You could see him go down in a lot of pain. We're expecting him to miss this game. It was only a 4-day turnaround. If it were Monday Night Football, something like that, would be a lot more likely to play, but going to be out for this game. Same thing with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. So both their top running backs going to be out. And this is a team that runs the ball a ton. So it's going to open up an interesting situation for this team that we'll talk about a little bit later. Jarvis Landry might be cleared to play. He's currently on IR, has been for quite some time, but rumors are that he's going to play Thursday. So haven't been activated yet. We haven't seen that. Again, that's something we'll talk about on the Thursday night live stream. So make sure you tune in there. Odell Beckham, highly questionable to play. And they say that he's siding towards doubtful. I mean, as of right now, listed as questionable, but we'll have to see if that changes here after Wednesday's practice. David Njoku, limited in practice. You have Willis on the O-line, questionable. Same thing with Tyler Conklin. J.C. Treader, also questionable. On the defensive side of things, we have Elliott at D-tackle, questionable. Wilson, their linebacker, questionable. Malik Jackson, questionable. And Jadeveon Clowney. All of them, their status is kind of more up in the air, a lot closer to game time decisions rather than just precautionary things. And also Green, their cornerback, is going to be questionable. So a team that is extremely banged up. Obviously the Broncos with plenty of the injuries on their own. But as a result, if you take a look at the game flow and what we expect here, a relatively low scoring game, 42.5 point over under. That's what you're going to get when you have offenses that are decimated like this and offenses that don't score a ton in general. I mean, we saw the Cleveland Browns go out and torch the Chargers, but that was very much so an outlier game. Both offenses were just clicking. The defenses looked like Swiss cheese. And in this game, we're going to see a very different picture. I mean, obviously, without Baker Mayfield, the Browns are going to go to somebody like Case Keenum, who didn't look very good last time out. I mean, they're more of a running offense anyways. But the problem is they don't have their starting two running backs. Also, a lot of their O-lines hurt. So I definitely think the Browns are going to struggle here. As of right now, they are 3.5 point favorites, but I'm not sure that should be the case. Again, they're down their starting quarterback. They're going to be down some guys on their O-line. They're both their starting running backs. They're playing with backups in almost every single position. So for them to be 3.5 point favorites even at home. Again, I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with that. So in terms of a game flow, I do expect a competitive game, but a relatively low scoring game. So you're looking for guys that do it a little bit more with PPR upside. Obviously, they get a few more catches just because we're not expecting any 70, 80-yard touchdowns, not a lot of touchdown production either. In terms of running backs, you want to make sure that they have some PPR upside, just like your wide receivers. Again, just not going to be a ton of yards to go around, not a ton of carries in general. We're expecting the game clock to probably go a lot faster in this game than most, just because each team's likely to run the ball a little bit more. Again, Teddy Bridgewater dealing with a couple injuries right now. It's not just one thing bothering him, so probably not going to rely on him as much as they would usually do so. So just keep that in mind when you look at these picks. Again, lower scoring game. We're looking for people that we know have built out roles, right? We're not going to take as many flyers this week. There's not going to be as many people priced down low that we can take chances on just because there's not going to be as much volume here. So for our Broncos stud options, at number 3, we have Teddy Bridgewater. And even though I don't think he's a massive part of this game, at least in terms of their usage, I think they're going to run the ball a little bit more on the Broncos side of things. The Cleveland Browns defense is very stout against the run, so they're not going to be able to just completely rely on that. They're going to have to pass the ball with Teddy Bridgewater. And to this point here of 2021, through 7 weeks, he's been great. He's been one of the better passers in the NFL. Somebody who has been efficient, obviously doing it good on a per pass basis. So even though he's going to be owned in 70.5% of lineups, definitely is going to be somebody I have in some of my lineups, just probably less than the field. I'm probably looking at a closer to 40 to 50% exposure mark, just because I'm not sure that he reaches that $11,000 price tag, right? It's a steep price, especially in such a low scoring game. I'm more trying to spread it out to people I know are going to get targets and aren't dependent on putting up a bunch of touchdowns. So even though he's projected for 18.8 points, not necessarily in love with him on this slate, particularly at captain, probably won't have any Teddy Bridgewater there. At number 2, we have Noah Fant at $8,200. So obviously a little bit of a more appetizable price tag there. Also somebody coming in with far less ownership at just 20.2% ownership at the flex spot. Relatively all right projection. You can see 13 points flat, and for a tight end, that's a good projection, but for Noah Fant, obviously lower than what we're used to seeing, typically projecting closer to 15.4 or even 15.5 points per game in most game scripts. A lot of that just comes down to the game flow here. Again, just 42.5 point over under. They're going to be running the ball a little bit more than usual, but somebody who does it with PPR upside, right? He's going to get 7 or 8 targets in most games, and with 5 or 6 catches, that could be more than enough to pay it off on this slate. So I really like the fact that he's going to see targets in this game. We know it, we've seen it week in and week out. Gets a lot of those short targets as well. And of course, Noah Fant, one of the more athletic tight ends in the NFL, capable of breaking off a long pass. So don't hate him there. Again, I don't like him as much as I would on most slates, but as a comparative play against anyone else on this slate, is one of the better point per dollar plays. At number 1, we have Courtland Sutton, which is by far my favorite play for this team. Obviously, Jerry Jeudy, as of right now, has a less than 50% chance of suiting up, so I'm projecting him out. And with Jerry Jeudy out of the lineup, Sutton has gotten a ton of usage. Close to 40% of the target share for Denver has gone through Sutton to this point. So even though he's being owned at 34.5% of lineups, at least at the flex position, somebody I'm going to be willing to get leverage on. I'm looking at probably a 60 to 70% exposure mark with him. He just projects well in terms of PPR. Also in terms of the red zone targets, gets even ramped up to 55, 60% usage in those scenarios. So Courtland Sutton, not a sneaky pick by any means, but somebody who makes a lot of sense for this single game slate. Now for our Browns stud options. At number 3, we have Case Keenum, obviously going to be stepping in for Baker Mayfield, who is doubtful at this point. He's going to cost $9,400 on this slate. Definitely getting his share of ownership there at 61.9%. Also, not projecting off the board or anything. You see him as a little bit of a lower projection than somebody like Bridgewater at 18.1 points. But anytime you have one of these lower scoring games, if a quarterback goes out, throws for 200 yards, that kind of thing, that can be more than enough production to pay off. So not somebody I'm going to be playing at captain. Again, with Teddy Bridgewater, probably getting less exposure than the field. I'm probably looking at about 30-40% exposure, but not somebody I'm completely fading, right? If it ends up being a really low-scoring game, hell, 250 passing yards might be enough to get by. If they throw a touchdown, probably enough too. So I don't hate Case Keenum, just a couple of other people that I'm a little bit more bullish on this slate, particularly on the Broncos side of things. For another stud tier option for this Broncos team, we have Donovan Peoples-Jones, who is very likely to be the number one wide receiver for this team yet again. We had Odell Beckham Jr., who is seemingly made of glass at this point, has been injured all of last year, obviously returning from that catastrophic injury, got hurt week 1, has seemingly had 3 or 4 injuries to this point of the year, and last week had another shoulder injury. So the guy's just racking up injuries left and right, like he was racking up yards for the New York Giants. Unfortunately, that's not what he's looking for at this point of the career. So for Donovan Peoples-Jones at $6,400, it's just a good price tag for the role that he should play. You can see him as of right now projected for 25.5% ownership in terms of our Showdown slate and a 14.5 point projection, which is more than enough at that price tag. Again, if Odell Beckham ends up being out of this game, you're looking at Jones getting likely 7.5, maybe 8 targets, which is going to be enough to pay off that price tag. Somebody who's going to project a little bit better than somebody like Noah Fant, just because of the opportunity on that team, just less options to go to on the Cleveland side of things with all these injuries, and at a better price tag as well. So Donovan Peoples-Jones going to be one of my favorite plays on this entire slate. But at number 1, our favorite play on the slate, and obviously for this Browns team as well, is going to be D'Ernest Johnson at $4,600. And he's going to be the starting running back now that we have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt both sitting. So he's definitely going to get a ton of steam. You've probably heard a million people telling you to pick him up on the waiver wires, that sort of thing, and obviously well warranted. And we don't know how long this role is going to last, probably at least 2 to 3 weeks until, actually I'd say 1 to 2 weeks until we get Nick Chubb back. He's looking like he's going to be back a little bit sooner than somebody like Kareem Hunt. But as of right now, at that kind of price tag, is almost a must play. He's going to be in every single lineup I have, whether that is at the captain slot or whether that's at the flex spot. We're going to talk about our captains a little bit later on in the video, but definitely somebody I am targeting at that position. You can see at that $4,600 price tag, obviously giving you quite a bit of salary relief. Projected right now for 16.2 points. I am getting 21.5 touches per game right now, right around 18 touches in a game, and right around 4 targets a game. So not going to give you a ton of PPR upside, which we'd love to have, but at that kind of price tag, those touches in terms of the running game are going to be more than enough. And to this point, we know the Browns have established their identity of offense as a rushing team. So D'Ernest Johnson definitely going to get some carries. We also have a few other backs in there that are a little bit less prominent for the Browns that I'll be mixing in here and there. We'll see a few of them on my projections if you guys are on the Patreon page, but definitely D'Ernest Johnson being the number 1 guy I'm targeting in that backfield. Real quickly before we hop into our value plays and our captain selections, just wanted to talk about my Patreon page where you guys can catch all of my NFL projections. So if you want my numbers for every player in this week's game, whether it be some of the backups, whether the starting quarterbacks, all my data, so not just projected points, not just projected ownership, but custom model rankings, archetype numbers, all the stuff I use to make my lineups, make sure to check out the link in the description. We'll have that up there. We do projections for every Showdown slate, for the main slate on Draftkings, and more. So make sure to join in there to get those numbers. And on top of just my projections, we also have the Discord server you get access to, where you can ask me questions at any point. You can interact with the rest of the community. We got some bright minds in there. And for the last 3 Showdown slates, we've had the 3 optimal lineups we do a weekly contest on there with the 5 to 10 of us every single time, and we've had 3 optimal lineups the last 3 weeks. So obviously some people in there that are really clicking on all cylinders, and the best part about this Patreon is just $1 for the month. So by far the best value in the entire industry. That's just $0.25 for the week, and if you break it down per game, you're talking just over $0.01 per game for my projections, which have been some of the most efficient in the entire industry. So highly recommend you guys go ahead and check that out. A link to join will be in the description. And now for our value plays, and just before we go into some of my options here, you could definitely go to the kickers on the slate, how you could even go to the defenses. Anytime you have a game that's in the 40s in terms of over-under, defenses become a little bit more attractive. Still not some of the best plays on Showdown, especially for cash games or anything like that. Their median projections aren't going to look too sexy. The kickers, though, could be a little interesting, right? We're dealing with offenses that one of them's without a quarterback, one of them's really banged up on the Broncos side of things, and as a result, could be a little bit less efficient in the red zone. So you could be looking at a few more kicks or at least field goal attempts for these kickers. So something I'll at least have in a main GPP type pool. But for my main value plays, at number 3, we have Kendall Hinton, who was the savior at quarterback for them last year. The Broncos obviously had the whole quarterback room going down with COVID violations, so Hinton had to play emergency QB, and boy, did that not go well. But that's not what we're worried about here. He's going to be playing wide receiver for them this time around. Not going to have to worry about that. So at $2,000, even though he's only projected for 4.4 points right now, could very well end up exceeding that. I mean, as of right now, seemingly going to be playing the number 3 wide receiver role for this team. And with Albert O benched, I mean, he's on IR right now, not going to be able to suit up. They're going to be playing a lot more 3 wide receiver sets. I mean, a team that was typically rolling out 2 tight ends in over 80% of snaps, they can't do that anymore. Their backup tight end, Seibert, just not somebody who you can rely on, especially like they were able to with Albert O and Noah Fant. So Kendall Hinton going to get a few more targets this week than most. We saw him get a few targets last week. If he's end up taking one of those targets and he ends up getting a big gainer, he can end up paying off the price tag. So somebody I'll have in a few lineups as a flyer play for this slate. And number 2, we have Anthony Schwartz, a little bit more of a consistent play. He's also only $1,200, coming in with a similar level of ownership there at 17.6%. Also projected a little bit higher, like I said, just a higher floor here. Somebody who will be playing at the number 3 wide receiver role for this Cleveland Browns team. You're going to have Donovan Peoples-Jones at 1, number 2, Rashard Higgins, and then you're going to have Anthony Schwartz. And Schwartz had a huge week in week 1, really got a lot of people excited, including myself. Ended up talking about him in week 2, and he's completely disappeared. But now that Odell Beckham Jr. is likely to be injured, and as of right now, Jarvis Landry not projected to be playing, Anthony Schwartz could have a bigger role than he's ever had. In week 1, he showed a lot of upside, with somebody who was getting a lot of targets, was also very explosive after the catch. So the rookie, even though he's completely disappeared since that week 1 performance, somebody I'm going to, as long as Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham do not suit up. But at number 1, our favorite value play in, again, it just comes down to Jarvis Landry and Odell not playing, is going to be Rashard Higgins, who's the clear number 2 wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns. He's only $3,600, who gives him a ton of salary relief if you end up using him. Also not gaining a ton of steam in terms of ownership at just 13.5%. So somebody I'm going to be using in almost every lineup as value. You can see projected for nearly 13 fantasy points, which completely dwarfs the other 2 on this list. I mean, obviously somebody is going to play nearly 90, maybe even 100% of snaps for the Browns, just because you have to have 2 wide receivers out there, and there's no one to really give him competition. I mean, Anthony Schwartz, nowhere near the same level of talent, but only really be playing every snap if one of the 2 ends up going down. So for me, Rashard Higgins, a slam dunk value play on the slate, and somebody I'm going to have plenty of. And now for our favorite captain options. At number 3, we have D'Ernest Johnson at $6,900, who gives you a ton of salary relief. Obviously still projecting very well there at 20.9% ownership. Also projected for 24.3 points. So could definitely be a little bit more chalky come tomorrow. So going to have to check on the projections come Thursday night. But Johnson going to have a very high floor here, going to get plenty of touches, and at $6,900, I don't think you necessarily need the salary savings, but he might end up being the highest scorer on the slate. There's definitely a method where he goes out there, scores 18 to 20 fantasy points, and completely outscores everyone else. So it's not really a salary thing for me. It's quite honestly, he has one of the higher ceilings on the slate as well. So really like him there at number 3, but at number 2, somebody who undoubtedly has a much higher median projection. So if I'm playing a cash game, definitely going to have Courtland Sutton at the captain slot. And even though he's going to be the most expensive captain I'm going to on this slate, he's getting single digit owned. So 8.9% ownership, a very good leverage spot right there because of the price tag. And again, somebody who's going to get a ton of PPR upside, especially if Jerry Jeudy does not end up returning. A clear number 1 wide receiver for this team that's seen a 40% target share. So projected for 24.6 points at the captain slot. And again, one of my favorite plays, period, on the entire slate. But for our number 1 captain play, and this might be a little bit of a surprise, but somebody who has extremely high upside, is extremely low owned right now, not getting a ton of steam. And Case Keenum has been a lot better than we've expected, so Donovan Peoples-Jones can end up having a massive game. So maybe I understated his performance a little bit earlier on in the video, but this guy's going to be the clear number 1 wide receiver right here. And at his price tag, he's at a sweet spot. He's at that kind of price tag where he can go out, score you a touchdown or 2, and easily end up optimal. And I think his only real competition on the slate, again, are really Sutton and Johnson to outscore him. And he's at that sweet spot of our price tag and the lowest owned of the bunch as well. So even though he comes up with a lower median projection at just 21.75 points, has a similar upside to both players. And again, in terms of a game theory aspect, might just be a little bit of a more attractive play. So I really like all 3 in this instance. Really just depends on what you're looking for. If you're in a cash game, really like going to Sutton. If you really need that salary, if you're trying to take both quarterbacks, of course, go to somebody like Johnson. But for a more well-rounded approach, with the captain I'll at least have the most exposure to will be Donovan Peoples-Jones. That is all I've got for my Thursday night football picks, guys. Go ahead and let me know down in the comments who you've got as your favorite captain play. Obviously for me, I'm taking a look at Donovan Peoples-Jones, but go ahead and let me know who you've got. Maybe it's somebody I had on my board, or maybe it's somebody I'm not even considering. Again, would love to get some debate going down in the comments for that. And as always, I really appreciate your support here on the channel, for stopping by, for watching and everything like that. If you guys haven't already liked the video, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, make sure you guys go ahead and do so. That way you guys don't miss any of the content I post in the future. I also post tons of Showdown content. We've got main slate content for DraftKings, golf content for all of the DFS contests out there, and even more to come. We're going to cover MMA, we cover NBA, pretty much everything that you're looking for from a DFS perspective. And the best part about it all is all being analyzed from a data-based perspective. Again, that's what all my analysis here on the channel is. I use my expertise as an engineer to go out, model, give you guys all of the projections that I use to make my own lineups. So with that all being said, again, thank you guys for stopping by. Thank you for all of your support. Until next time, good luck with all of your lineups, and I'll see you guys on Thursday night for the live stream.